Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of a higher dimensional field. I sit in front of you today to record another 40 something minute tranquilized frequency within my frequency field of ideations unheard of prior to the descent into the physicality of us, of a humanity so stark in contrast within the darkness that we've decided to fractal into within creation scope in itself. And so bright in all that it's ever been within the realization of the darkness that we've been sitting within and without this quantum field for all of this time. And when I speak words of remembrance from an oversoul that had also fractaled out the majority of the humanitarian field within our field, within the brightness of what is, within the neutrality consciousness of what is, and within the darkness that encompasses the entirety of this field, within this field, and without this field. And when I say darkness, I do not mean something that is outside of who and what we intrinsically believe ourselves to not be within any moment in time. As if you stick with me through this 45-minute projection field, you will come into a realization within the memory scope of everything that you shall forever, ever, never not be, that you are, ladies and gentlemen, so intrinsically tied into the darkness that resonates within the reality scope of where you sit. Of where you sit in that chair, in the car, on the way to work, in the chair at your office during work hours, on your bed as you doom scroll social media, of where you sit in this moment in time listening to my projection field, whether or not you choose to listen to a podcasted version or a video scope version on YouTube or whatnot, regardless of what devices you choose as a humanitarian field to project your energetic frequency onto certain ideations within a projection field of awakening to your true destiny, to the destiny of the remembrance of the darkness in which you've decided to steep yourselves, in which we've decided to steep ourselves way down below our capacities within the realization that we are capable. We are capable of sinking so deeply within those aspects of the self that we never expected ourselves to sink into within any moment in time prior to the fractaling within this quantum verse of creation fields that we decided to tumble ourselves through the expansion process of what is throughout and through in this creative scape of a field of ours. We decided to, unbeknownst to humanity itself, seep into such deep distortions within the amnesia field of the representation of the self, of being able to experience the self on all fronts from an amnesia perspective of what it would be like to break off into a consciousness to experience the darkness within our reality field at large. At the smallest pinpoint perspective of where you sit as a fractaled aspect within the consciousness of of a humanitarian field, of humanity itself, of the smallest pinpoint aspect of the smallest blade of grass you could ever find in its baby form growing out, perhaps not from the ground as of yet, prior to the formation of this blade of grass. The consciousness that will carry it to life had already been there, imprinted onto the dirt, imprinted onto the seed, imprinted into the blades of grass, sitting so distortedly, standing so distortedly, dying so distortedly next to this blade of grass, unbeknownst to itself that it had become the seedling, the sproutling, the consciousnessling that links the all, within a distortional field of never ever not being that blade of grass or that field of peonies or that sky filled with this consciousness, or within the oceanscapes of what is within Gaia's scape of all consciousness. The entirety of the all is filled with some sort of consciousness. And as you sit there in your own fractaled consciousness being as the person that you are, you have a name, you have a distortion field, you have a family, you have a story, you have a mother, you had a father, you may not have had such a loving family, you had grandparents, so to say, you may have been grown in a lab, depending on the projection field in creation, in which your soul chose to show up for itself within the reflective mirroring systems, within the artificial intelligence systems, within this quantum verse. You may or may not know where you come from. One thing is for sure is that you hold a consciousness that belongs to the all within a humanitarian field of humanity itself. And yet, above and beyond the scope of this consciousness, just know that there's more out there, that it doesn't stop at the bordering system of our equator system. And unbeknownst to men, unbeknownst to all, this equator system that I speak of holds an energetic lineage of the encompassment of the turmoils within the darkness of what is, that grasps and interlinks and staples the darkness within this consciousness down onto the surface of Gaia. The entirety of the equator system will begin to shift, has begun to shift, as Gaia's magnetic north and south poles have begun to already shift into the distortional fields over the Siberian lands. And as it lands, wherever it decides to land, our very own equator that has bordered the systematic failures within the energetic realm of the Luciferian scheme of things, that has stapled down the darkness within these two-dimensional portals onto Gaia's very own blueprint, will begin to unlatch and unleash an energy that you've never noticed before. It will creep up on humanity as the days pass, as the months pass. The turmoil, you can smell it. The dedication within the darkness of what is and what can never ever not be an aspect of a portion of humanity within the self of all selves, within this consciousness that I speak of, dedicates its entirety of its lineage within the identification system of the equator system, bordering Gaia's surface, that staples, so to say, the lineage of the darkness onto her energetic blueprint. And as this lineage begins to relinquish itself from wanting to and needing to be stapled no more, it will undoubtedly relinquish the darkness that's been reliant on it for its existence for all of this time. And as it begins to unlinquish and intermingle itself into societal field at large, you will breathe in this energy pocket. For those of you who can feel and sense a darkness rising, even at this point, late January 2026, at the beginning point and perspective of this year of 2026, the last year before the collapse of a system, of a systematic system within the darkness of what is leading up to the New World Order, the supposed planned New World Order of the 2030 agenda that is creeping up on us. And when I say 2030, I'm not just spewing out a number. Strategically, world leaders, the elites that are shadowing behind these world leaders who are manipulating their consciousness to do certain biddings for their allegiance to the dedication towards this equator system that must be protected at all costs as it shifts and intermingles itself back into the brightness of what is. Consciousness itself will begin to shift in itself, not the elites, not the darkness, not the coherence of the portion and the fractaling of the consciousness within the darkness that I speak of, that has been residing upon the dependency upon the equator system. borderlining sanity, borderlining wars, borderlining murder, borderlining rape, borderlining all kinds of causes within the deception scope of what is, to relinquish itself in all of its power onto humanity itself, had always been the ultimate becoming goal within its destination so steeped in the deliverance of fear, of separation, of manipulation strategies that had encompassed a whole entire congruency of planet Gaia. By dragging her into an energetic output of negative fruitions, it had been able to staple down consciousness as a whole into an external field that would not so easily be able to be suppressed for much longer than it has been until this moment in time. And as societal field begins to awaken to their destiny, to their destination, to their memory scope of a memory foretold within a time of no time, of coming into an understanding that you are divinity through and through. That blade of grass had always been you. The animal on your plate had never ever not been you. That tree on your lawn had always been the aspect of the animal on your plate. The wooden chair that you sit in had always been able to hold a consciousness and representation of the all within you. And as you become malignant enough to come into these realizations, not by sheer flukes of fault lines tilting towards a higher dimensional frequency that you will be able to project your energetic body into, but by sheer destiny within the destination scope of Yeshua's predictions, of Yeshua's scope, of a source prediction within a creation scope that had been designed to predict itself back into the predictability of the retraction process that it would take prior to fathoming the extent of the expansive process that it took for humanity to get to this point in perspective as we begin to retract our consciousness back into the allegiance of the wholeness that has never ever left us since the beginning of this tranquility that we don't remember in this lifetime. We've not been able to step into yet as a humanitarian field. As a singularity of a fractal, my light workers, you may sit and smile at my projection scope if you've awakened enough to remember this tranquility. Just know that as we do so, you're not alone. There are many, many of you, hundreds of thousands of souls fractaled out into oblivion with no distinction of how wide, how far, how deep, how tranquilized, how high, how low, how wide this energy can travel and spread from person to person, from soul to soul, from entity to energies, from blades of grass to pops of colors in these fields of peonies, to olive branches in these olive trees that had forever archingly carried this source consciousness within the allegiance of wanting to and needing to come to a collapse within this field of a consciousness that had always been you, that had always been I. And as we step in to the conglomerancy of the meaning within all of this, as we come into the realization of the ascension process that each and every one of us will need to step into as light workers, holding an allegiance to the all, dedicating our fractal to the all, being a part of the all, making up the energetic frequency that has never, never, ever not been within the all of what is. We will undoubtedly find each other, notice each other, but at this point in time, it's not time within the physicality of what is to do such feats. It's not time for the darkness to rise in such despair, to cause the alleviation within our soul's boundary system, to awaken to our entire capacity of what humanity is capacitated to come into a realization of. And as we do so, and we undoubtedly will do so, some of you light workers might be listening to my projection field feeling hopeless as the past few days prior to your awakening, following your awakening, or during your awakening journey have felt like never-ending stepping stones of blockages that you could never fathom to step through or walk throughout. Just know that the strength inside you will carry you through to the gates of the Galactic Federation that is dawning upon us, that has opened its doors upon our energy bodies. And if you are brave enough, you will walk through with your head held up high, as you know of the strength that they carry in representation of the all, as you know of the strength that you carry in representation of the very same strength that they carry. And as a congruency of a whole, we will awaken in unfathomable numbers leading up to the end of this destruction field within the expansiveness, within the expansive field of all that expansion ever represented within our reality field of what is. And as I sit here pledging allegiance to this one true fact, to this all dying fact, to this all true facts of facts that can never be disputed, you may not remember, they may not remember, we may not remember, it may not remember, as you felt so hopeless and helpless, as you felt this distortional field that hasn't been able to ease up around you, as you felt the thickness of the non-belonging, of the memories that has creeped up on you in the middle of these nights, as you felt the rejection scope within your family, scope within your friend, scope within your work, scope within the purposelessness of the way you feel that life should have perhaps turned out to be more normal than not, could have perhaps turned out to be less normal than most people would have liked to live their life in the becoming of. And yet you chose to be a light worker in this very moment in time, ladies and gentlemen, in this lifetime. That was never meant for you. Normalcy had never ever meant a thing in this quantum verse. And before that, prior to the creation of the word normalcy and what it truly means in our soul, in our oversoul, in creation itself, in God's third eye chakra, in God's eye, brain, mind, heart, in coherence, in unity, in unifying consciousness. There had never been a placement in reality field where you are needed more so than you are needed in this moment in time, sitting in that very chair of yours. And I plead with you to never give up the hope in your bosom, in your heart chakra, in your third eye chakra, that all is not what it seems. That source is a part of you as it is a part of Yeshua, as it is a part of all. And that the strength inside you will carry you into your final destination, unwavering in the defeats that it's never been able to be defeated to know or see or tell the tales of in this moment in time, as it does not remember of the capacity that it is able to fulfill and step into the energetic field of as of yet. Hold on to the faith in your heart chakra, in your bosom, that love is real, that love is here, that life is dawning upon us as we begin to awaken. And that prior to that, we had only been living in an illusionary scape of thumb twiddling, of knicker-knackering, of having fun in this playscape in our childhood, rolling around in the grass, not taking things too seriously, though we've been adulting this whole entire time, as most of you will have come into a realization of the multidimensionality of your soul's bearing within your adulthood. Some of you are still at a very young and tender age, but you will be guided with a higher up entity, energy that you've relinquished your power to in the moments of your childhood, that you've trusted the directional frequency and scope of this overarching higher up entity and energy that carries the entirety of who you are. And when I say higher up, I do not mean that there's a lineage within who's more important and who's not. By all means, that is not what I'm referring to. But the lineage that I am referring to is that of the parenthood, of the grandparenthood, of the cousinhood, of the camaraderiehood. There's somebody, something out there, an energy body, an angel, a galactic force so great that is driving the directional frequency of these light working children that have a compass that will awaken under the care of this energy field. And within this higher up field, within a dimensional frequency, within a 4D, 5D, 6D, all the way up to the angelic realm, D in frequency, this pocket of ours, of Gaia's frequency within the 2D, 3D, and 4-dimensional frequency will begin to alleviate itself into existence itself. To need to and want to merge back into the light and neutrality of what is had never been the end goal. The be all and end all of the goals that it could have ever set out for itself. It has been incapacitated to even do just that. Though Source would have liked to bring these dependencies within these soul groups home from the darkness of what is, some things just can't be helped. Some things have been created, were created, was created upon a time of defeat to justify just that, so that we would be able to experience the opposition of what is a specific amount of energetic output had to be dedicated towards the creation field of the darkness within our quantum verse, within our consciousness itself, that had allowed itself in from a different perspective, from a different frequency field outside of our quantum verse itself. Outside of our quantum verse itself, ladies and gentlemen, as reality field is far broader, far wider, far taller than that blade of grass can ever grow in your imagination. And I've touched base on this in previous videos, and I will do so in subsequent videos, but for now, I will focus on our quantum verse itself. And as the darkness cannot conceptualize the meaning of being able to ascend into a brightness of what is, it will forevermore be compartmentalized into a frequency of knots, into a frequency of pauses, into a frequency of retraction, into a frequency of separation, in a separated state. For the last time, and perhaps not for the last time. As you know, energy never dies. It only shifts and lingers around and collapses and then perhaps expands once upon a time, upon no time, when it is ready to be released again into expansion, into the knowing, into the growing, into the forgiving of itself, to be able to tranquilize itself back into the brightness, to experience the darkness of what is within our reality field, ladies and gentlemen. The philosophical meaning of all of this will blow over your head in any moment in time, in now time, as we're still anchored down so deeply into the 2D and 3-dimensional and 4-dimensional frequency of what is. Yet within the 4-dimensional frequency of what is, there's a silver lining that borderlines the 5D, in which the majority of you light workers have floated to the very bordering system of this silver lining that I speak of. Congruencies can never dictate the aspect within the self that speaks of this dictation system within the silver lining. And as I touch base on this frequency that is so intrinsically whole in all that it's ever been, just know that no matter what frequency you sit in, what daughter you birthed that decided to sit in which specific frequency that had already been carrying the darkness within, that is unable to ascend, which son you birthed who is unable to ascend, which grandparents raised you who is unable to ascend, which teacher taught you who is unable to ascend, which boyfriend raped you who was unable to ascend. Chances are, had you been a light worker, if you are a light worker, you are surrounded by these darkened beings within the demonic realm, without the demonic realm of the lower 2D forces. As humanity shifts in bloodlines, humanity has been shifting in humanoid bodies throughout this reality field. And chances are, if you are a light worker, you've contracted yourself to fractal into the darkness, the darkest darkness, pits of despair within this reality field, to be able to educate yourself so that by the time of awakening, you would know what it's like to be raised by this frequency that knows no bordering scope between consciousness, forgiveness, deception, the disallowance of the brightness to wash over their consciousness is what they were made to project into our reality field. And they will stand by their resolution. They will fight by their steadfast resolution to be the way that they perceive themselves to be, the way that they were crafted to be to begin with. No matter who you are, no matter who you were raised by, no matter who you think you are, there's no wrong place within reality. There's no right place within reality. All has been created in equal feats, in equal fronts, in equal liability field within all fields. Just as we've expanded into oblivion, we will retract ourselves back into a singularity within a consciousness of knots, within a neutrality scope of experiencing 1,000 years of neutrality. Just as we have expanded into oblivion, into wars, into murders, into manipulation, into whole entire societal fields, bridged up within these makeshift concentration camps underneath this makeshift energetic bordering system of what the matrix represents in our reality field over innocent children's heads, over the Palestinian lands, over all lands within Gaia's field and upon her surface. Just as we've been created to come into this reality field to project the true meaning of why we're here, the darkness has fulfilled its duty. Its relinquishing mission need not be respected. Its relinquishing mission needs not be met with forgiveness. Its relinquishing mission needs not be met with confusion. Needs not be met with any type of distortional field that we sit in. Forgiveness, my friends, within the Arcturian realm, my friends within all realms, my friends within the quantum verse that we sit in, that we crafted specifically to experience these types of defeats, to bring home lessons of knowing thyself in such a spectacular forefront. And as we sit here upon Gaia's surface, I'm proud to declare to you that the ascension has begun, that the ascension will not ring in until mid-2027, and that you are a light worker. And even though you're not, had you been the one carrying 39 demonic entities in your auric field, had you been the one raping women on the battlefield, had you been the one creating these wars in the time of Genghis Khan, had you been the devil himself in ideology, you are loved, you are whole, you are source consciousness within creation itself, created for a purpose, created for the scenic route, to become unscenic within the experience scope of the reflective systems within the bordering system of our consciousness, in between the 4D and the 5D bridge of consciousness that will carry us through to another dimensional frequency of what is, in another experience field of what is. There's no right and there's no wrong. There has never been any right or wrong. But yet only in the placement of the humanoid mind in the 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional, and 4-dimensional frequency can we come into a resolution of how wrong, of how right, of how divisive, of how decisive, of how separated, of how merged, of how unifying, of how judgmentalism works in our reality field. And as you step out of these fields that has driven your innate knowledge of what is, you will step into an alternate reality field that will relinquish itself in the need, in the want to experience none of that and all of that, all at the same time, bringing you into wholeness in perspective. As you needed to experience that, you needed to step into the darkness within the brightness of what is, within the darkness of what is, within the brightness of what is, within the darkness of what is, to come into a realization that you've been whole this whole entire time. Chances are, if you're a light worker, you've made it through to this point in perspective of my video, yet the processing scope within the humanity of your humanoid brain, of your animalistic detangling of the energetic systems that I speak of, may or may not have delayed the processing of the cognitive resolutions of what it takes to process the words that I speak in this video, in this moment in time. But do not fear. Do not alleviate yourself into the overthinking of these ideations that I speak of. It is the frequency that you will feel into that will lead you into downloads in the middle of the night to come into coherence with your destination, with your destiny that had never ever not been you to begin with. There's nothing that you cannot comprehend or recognize or experience or disagree with or fumble over or stumble over in your experience field that is not correct, that is uncorrected, that is correct in its entirety. That is the all within the all of who and what you shall never not be. Go with it, flow with it, like a river shall forever flow against a moonlit night with never-ending deception fields of pulling and skewing and rising and darkening and deepening into a field that never ever ends and never ever fails to shift you in the correct directionary frequency of where you need to go. Trust that God is real. Trust that God is you. Trust that God is here. Trust that the biblical structures are also congruently and incongruently more whole than the words can speak, more representative than the words can carve out within any reality fields. And that God has a plan for humanity that goes deeper than those biblical pages, and that God wrote this book as a reminder field of what it would be like had humanity awakened to come into a realization of the honorability that is intrinsically already within and without our quantum verse built into the whole entirety of what is. And as we come into the realization of the knickknacks, of the breadcrumbs, of all that God has done to lead us to this destination of exactly the second in where you are, you will never fathom the integrity that you hold, that has incapacitated you in the middle of the night to come into a realization of being able to hold this integrity within your soul's bearing. As the humanly decisions that you've been making may or may not be so righteous within any moment in time, as you are sitting in the 2D to 4D frequency, borderlining the 3-dimensional realm of where you sit. As we ascend higher and higher, you will step into the integrated system that will never fail, has never failed, has never ever known the meaning of failure, if failure had ever been a thing outside of the perception field where you sit, that has trained you into the belief system that you sit in this box in this moment in time, not being able to accomplish that in which you are not capable to, as a perception field of the reality that you sit in. But as we come into divinity, and not just any divinity that I speak of, as we come into the relinquishing of the capacitated feats that we've been holding over our own consciousness for all of this time within the equator system, that will begin to shift and relinquish via the shifting of Gaia's magnetic poles, the skewing, the shaking, the force that you feel in all of these earthquakes, in all of these fault lines shifting, will begin to ultimately unleash and relinquish this energetic blueprint that tackles down the darkness onto the equator system. The shaking, the shifting, the intrinsic knowing within Gaia's soul that something spectacular had been happening inside her being for all of this time. Besides the fact of supporting life upon lifetimes, of resolutions, of wars, of darkness, preceding the vindication of what we can remember as a humanity field, just know that Gaia is a being, and she's proud. She's proud of us. She doubts herself at times. She's shy. She's indecisive. She's glorious in all that she's ever been able to withhold and uphold in this reality field, in finally being able to stand up and shift into a higher dimensional field, in saying, no, this is no longer what she wants to experience in this lifetime of hers, in this all-encompassing lifetime of hers. Let's hold her hand. Let's hold her energy field. Let's groom her into the recognition of the power that beholds her in the nights that doubts her frequency within the doubt frequency that she sits in the days that cries and relinquishes this doubt frequency in the shaking of her bosom within the cups of these fault lines. She's shivering in despise of what she has been holding on to for all of this time, in agreeance with her soul contracts. She cries. As you and I, she feels so deeply for humanity in itself, and for us not to notice that this has been happening for eons and eons of evolutionary feats. We will stand up tall when we come to this realization and be there for her, undoubtedly, as she is the consciousness within us, within her, within source consciousness of unity. Just as that bird that you eat on your plate had been a part of you in frequency and consciousness in all, so has the energy that runs through these fault lines, through the equator system, through the darkness, through Gaia's energy body, been a part of you. Be a part of you, is a part of you, is a part of all, has been, will be, will never not be, a part of the all within the scope of reliving the darkness within the brightness, within the darkness, within the brightness of what is. And as I come across the 40-minute mark, I'm satisfied. I'm satisfied in the projection that this video has come across in this amount of time, as in the past I've not been able to project such frequencies in this amount of time. I'm satisfied in the way that you've sat and listened so intently, not coming into a realization of the divinity that it takes to be able to make it this far into this video. I'm satisfied with all that you've ever been, with all that I've ever been, with all that the Luciferian scheme of things have ever delivered into our consciousness as a whole, within the lesson scopes of forgiveness. That shall encompass us as we anchor in a new dimensional frequency of a unity consciousness that will lead us into the 1,000 years of peace, of Christ consciousness, of being so whole that we could have never fathomed a time when we were unwhole, when we felt unwhole, as we've never ever been unwhole. And as you kiss the ground, the feet in which he walked, in which he walks, just know that those feet have always been a part of who you are. Those have always been your footsteps in the entirety of the all of what is. And within the tranquilized energy field that we will undoubtedly begin to relinquish, say a prayer, be thankful, Be justified in your anger. Be justified in your grief. Be justified. And let it go. Let go of all of the times that you haven't been able to be justified in the honorability of the soul's bearing that you deserve to step into in tomorrow's time, in the next steps that you begin to take to alleviate yourself back into the all of what is. Be grateful for all of the lessons brought to our footsteps, into our backyards, onto our front lawn, of all the children being tortured and manipulated into becoming IDF soldiers, for they do not know what they do. They do not know the turmoil that they've caused. They have not had the experiences that can relinquish them into the feeling of knowing more than what they've been taught to believe. Be justified in the anger that you feel for the death of your children. Be justified and let it go, as the murderers have been you all along. The victims have been you all along. Gaia's bosom that carries it all has been you all along. God has been you. The kingdom of heaven is within and without. And within, the within, the within, the without. The within that can never be without, within you. So be justified as you step into a forever arching forgiveness of oneness with source consciousness, as we begin the up-leveling of this energetic frequency back into the all, at the end of a field of poppies and peonies that will begin a new tomorrow of 1,000 years of peace with Yeshua, within Yeshua's field of unbeknownst to men in this very moment in time, your field, my field, our field of poppies and peonies that we've created to once upon a time relinquish all of the pain, all of the turmoil back into the self, to be learned and mutilated back into forgiveness of what is within the unity of all. And as we recollect all of these humanitarian lessons during the retraction process of coming back to a societal field with no judgments, with no limitations, withholding the encompassment of the frequency that we've stepped in. Just know that some of you may not make it past the point of the allegiance of needing to or wanting to step into the 5-dimensional frequency post-creation of the allotment of this frequency. Just know that some of you will merge so fully and wholly in energetic frequency with the all in the very split moments that we create this field, as your energy had been so needed to create this field, ladies and gentlemen. And if you are that light worker who will relinquish his or her soul, its soul, back into Gaia's body, back into the angelic realm, back into the energy body of all, to create the anchoring of this field, it will come to you. It will come to you in the middle of the nights as it's come to me. I wish you well within this field of coherence, of unbelievability, so beyond belief that you will not believe your eyes or your ears within the anchoring system of your downloads. You will fight, you will kick, you will scream at the unfairness of it all, wondering if God is even real. Just know God is you. As real as you are sitting there, as you pinch yourself, you can feel it. Tap into that heart chakra and you will never lose yourself, I promise. God is within and without, within the within that without that within, and within you, I and all, that we've never ever not been. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the all-encompassing, congruent realm of creation within a creation scope of all. I look forward to subsequent submissions of guilt, of tardiness, of within a unifying force of all that has never not been you.